Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the thematic discussions of PYQs from Anthropology Mains Examination Papers. The theme for today is religion. Generally, it is a part of your socio-cultural anthropology, and we see pretty easy questions from this particular part. Right. So, if we categorize based on themes, what kind of questions can be asked from this particular unit? First set of questions are generally static questions, where they'll ask you what are the approaches to study religion, meaning that anthropologically there are multiple perspectives, multiple schools of thought, multiple points of view to study religion as an institution. So, what are those approaches? This is one of the most common question. Second kind of question can be where they are asking you to write a short note on the practitioners. Okay, the religious practitioners, like we have shaman, sorcerer, medicine man, etc. Right, so short note on them. Third type of question here is trying to draw a parallel between traditional forms of religion and the modern day philosophies, which are revolving around the idea of environmental sustainability and climate change. Now, one such question that was asked was animism and deep ecology, and what is the interrelationship between them. The fourth question, again a static one, what are the forms of religion in tribal societies? Okay, a traditional question where you will be describing that in what ways is religion observed and practiced in the tribal forefront. Next, they can ask you about what is the difference or relationship between religion, magic, and science. And then a short note on the realm of sacred and profane and what are the perspectives as per Durkheim's point of view. Right. There can also be scholar based questions on religion, which can be integrated with anthropological theories and asked separately. For example, we were asked about Clifford Geertz' idea on religion. How do Clifford Geertz look at religion? So, the school of symbolic and interpretative thought was integrated with religious perspective from a case study that he had done. And the second type of question, which was interlinked with respect to a scholarly interpretation and conceptual idea, is with respect to Levi Strauss's idea of myth of Asdewall and what were the learnings out of that myth. Right. So these are the two kinds of questions that we see. Most of the questions will be answerable because they'll be from your static point of view, right? You should know the approaches, you should know the practitioners. There can be a short note on witchcraft, sorcerer, etc. These questions are generally sorted. When it comes to scholar-based questions where there is a interdisciplinary approach, where anthropological theory is being linked to a particular religious interpretation, then you can take your call. Okay, depending upon firstly whether you have to answer the question or not, if it is not compulsory. And then if you end up answering the question, you should also be able to delineate the relationship between the scholar and the concept. So for that, in-depth knowledge of case study related to the scholarly work is needed, that has to be presented, and then the work has to be analyzed. Right? Now let us see a few questions from this topic. So first one, approaches to study religion. So when we talk about different kind of approaches which are used to study religion, so as we know, anthropological perspectives deal a lot with approaches, right? So for example, so firstly we have the evolutionary approach, we have the psychological approach, we have a Marxist approach. Okay, so generally you will look at the theme of the approach, that what is approach trying to say and how can we describe that particular approach, right, with respect to religion. So the first one over here is evolutionary approach. So evolutionary school of thought or classical evolution was one of the most earliest school which tried to explain that how religion as a phenomena, as a societal phenomena, originated for mankind. So we had E.B. Tylor, we had James Fraser, L.H. Morgan talking about evolution of religion from one form to another form in different societies. So there you can talk about E.B. Tylor's animatism. See, if you look at E.B. Tylor's perspective from evolutionary point of view, According to him, animism is the first form of religion, right? Animism gave way to fetishism, fetishism gave way to polytheism, and finally came monotheism. So this is Tyler's perspective on religion, right? So animism, you all know, belief in the concept of soul. Fetishism is belief in certain magical powers which can infuse into certain objects, and therefore they harbor certain superpower called as mana, right? That is fetishism. Then we have polytheism, where there is belief in multiple gods, and then finally we have monotheism. And if you look at E.B. Tyler's explanation, there is a a comparable chart which you can draw between evolution of different forms of religion along with the evolution of civilizations from the savagery to barbarism to civilization stage. Right? That was the earliest example which we have. Then came R.R. Marey. R.R. Marey talks about animatism to be the first step towards evolution of religion into more complex forms as we know today. So animatism manifests in the form of objects having certain superpowers like mana, mulugu, orinda. These are traditional terms which are used for objects having supernatural powers within them, right? And are capable of creating a lot of influence. Then came James Fraser, belonging to the same school of thought, who talked about how religion evolved into magic and magic gave way to science. So James Fraser's idea was religion, magic, and science. This is the evolutionary trajectory. So as per the evolutionary approach, this was the explanation which was taken upon, right? But however, the evolutionary approach was criticized by later scholars like Franz Boas, who said that this is a very speculatory perspective. It does not have any evidence-based idea. It's very speculation-based, and it is not at all highlighting cultural dispersion as well. Because there can be cultural dispersion from one place or one country to another country, which eventually can also carry religion along with its dispersion. So that element of diffusion and dispersion was not accounted for, right? Now, if you look at the second approach, see here, psychological approach can be clubbed with the functionalist approach, because the psychological component that we are talking about over here is based on Malinowski's theory of needs. So Malinowski gave a biological theory of needs where he talks about all the social organization that exists around us. They exist to fulfill our needs, basically, right? So that is also called as the psychological approach given by Malinowski. So you can give a heading called functionalistic approach to religion, and there you can write about Malinowski, first point. And then you can also write about Radcliffe Brown, right, and his study on Andaman Islanders. You can write about how religion holds a very central place amongst the Kurgi society as studied by M.N. Srinivas. And the crux of the matter here is we'll be talking about how society is a self-regulatory system for functionalists. Because whenever functionalists, they try to explain any phenomena around them, they try to look for the purpose of the phenomena, right? So they believe that society is a self-regulating system, and to regulate itself, it has religion, right? So you can make subheadings of Radcliffe Brown, M.N. Srinivas, and Malinowski. The third approach is psychoanalytical approach. Now, the father of this approach is Sigmund Freud, who is very famous for his concept of totemism, how he talks about generation of totems because of deep subconscious psychological conflict among the societal groups. So for Sigmund Freud, the origin of religion in the form of totemism is because of that conflict which is existing in the mind of the people. Right? So totemic animal and how its representation becomes more manifested in the daily life of people. You can also mention Ruth Benedict's idea of culture configurations and culture pattern over here. The next perspective you can add is structuralist perspective. So who spearheads the structuralist perspective? Levi-Strauss. So as per Levi-Strauss, the cognitive structures mirror social structures, right? That is the central theme of Levi-Strauss's idea. So he believed that primitive religion system are fundamentally communication system, because people are going to use religion as a mode of communication with each other. And the second structuralist point of view which you can use here is Louis Dumont, who talks about the notion of purity and impurity and the related gods, specifically in the Indian scenario. So there are different gods for different sects of people. So that is also helping us understand that how societal structure is being reflected in the religious sentiments as well, right? The next approach which you can add here is the Marxist approach. So Marxist approach is very clear on its stand when it believes that religion is nothing but a work of fiction. It has been created to make people miserable. That is what Karl Marx believes in. And one of the main motto of religious institution is to create and reinstate class-based differences. Maurice Gaudelier also belongs to the same school of thought, right? And gave the example of Mabuti pygmies who treat their forests as their kin. And in fact, religion is also used by them to maintain and retain the social order as well, right? The next perspective that we have is symbolic perspective, which was given by Evans Pritchard over here. So we are talking about the study of symbolic aspect of religion. For example, Victor Turner studied the Dembu rituals, which are considered to be the rites of passage or liminality, where adolescent population or a child when they undergo rites of transition from one stage of life to another stage, there is a marked representation of figurines on their body, tattooing, etc., which indicates that they are stepping into a very important stage of life. So you can add this perspective as well, right? This question is on phases of rites of passage, that what is the origin of idea of phases of rites of passage. This concept is also called as liminality. For the first time, it was given by Arnold von Gennep, but later on it was adapted by Victor Turner, different anthropologists when they were trying to study, the stages of life in different populations across the world. There are certain stages. When you talk about phases of rites of passage, you are going to explain the phases in different stages. Then generally there are three. Okay, when we talk about the first stage where there is separation, okay, the second is liminality, and third is incorporation. What happens in the separation stage? For example, there are certain rituals which are associated with the birth of a particular child. There are circumcision rituals in Maasai. There are Baptist rituals in the Christian community. So this ritual, when this ritual is performed on you, you are separated from the rest of the common people and you are a different person now. Now you have to enter into the next responsible phase of your life. You have to enter in some else, shoes. So this separation phase is like pulling you out of the society as a separate individual and then preparing you for the change. So the second one is what is called as liminality. Liminality is the phase where the actual changes are happening. For example, adolescent rituals, marriage rituals, Ritukala Samskar in the Hindu system, right? So these mark the adolescent age-related rituals which are practiced in different parts of the world. And then we have incorporation. See, firstly, you are separated from the society. Then you go through the liminal stage where all the changes are happening. And then you are incorporated back into the society to fulfill all your roles and responsibilities, right? So that is called as the stage of incorporation. And what is the function of rites of passage? It creates a sense of oneness in the community. So it brings in cultural cohesion, it brings in personal growth, and it is important to study as a life stage based transition as well, right? Okay. Next question is on animism and deep ecology. So again, a static question. How will you approach this? You have to define what is animism and what is deep ecology in two statements in the introductory part of your answer. Animism is the earliest form of religion which believes in the concept of everything having a soul, whether living or non-living, everything has a soul. Whereas deep ecology is an environmental philosophy which believes in the idea that human beings should use environment judicially and not to fructify all their needs and greeds. So therefore, deep ecology is a modern day ecological philosophy which is focusing on sustainable development. Now, since this is a 10 marker, you have to bring the relationship between animism and deep ecology. So there is a point of commonality between both the concepts where you can highlight what are the points of commonality. Since animism believes in religion, it will promote protection of anything that has soul. So indirectly, animism as an idea is also promoting environmental sustainability and respect, right? Whereas deep ecology as a philosophy itself is protecting the nature around us. That is the kind of overlap that exists between the concept of animism and deep ecology, right? So you can highlight this. For example, what are the examples of animism? You can start with E.B. Tyler's example, E.B. Tyler's idea of animism, and you can give examples like tree worship, sacred groves, etc. They are all parts of animism, right? And then you can talk about deep ecology. The scholar who gave this concept is Arne Nice, right? And it is a modern ecological philosophy which is a response to environmental crisis. It is giving you a holistic approach to live properly, live properly in this world without damaging the ecological resources a lot, right? So it's also advocating reviving the local cultures and their sustainable ecosystems, because there's a belief system that local cultures generally have the ability to sustain their way of life despite the challenges that are there in the form of any kind of environmental losses as well. So you can give that example as well, right? Now there are certain principles of deep ecology. First is it wants well-being of all life forms. Second is richness and diversity in life. Third is humans have no right to compromise the environment for their private needs. And fourth is policy change, right? So it is an ecocentric philosophy which keeps ecology at the center, environment at the center. Right, so you can describe your answer like this. If you want, you can draw this Venn diagram also, where you can draw the areas of commonalities between animism and deep ecology. For example, both of them value nature, both of them are interconnectedness, show interconnectedness with respect to humans as well as nature. There is environmental ethics in both of them, and they provide us a holistic view, right? So you can conclude it like this. So again, a static question, short note on shaman, sorcerer, and medicine man. So a simple question. In questions like these, you have to have at least 5 to 7 lines of description for each of the religious functionary being asked in the question, and you can put it into perspective. Who is a shaman? Generally, shaman is considered to be the technician of the sacred, who has the potential to communicate with the superpowers, and it's an expert in human soul. Generally, he is a male, and he maintains a very spiritual aura. It is considered to be one of the important mechanisms through which human beings can heal themselves. So for healing, shaman is considered to be a great authority, and it also helps you deal with spirits, right? Whereas sorcerer is generally associated with magic, right? For example, Harry Potter was a sorcerer. Whereas shaman is generally seen to be a person who can help you heal, but sorcerer is someone who is engaged in black magic, right? So association with magic is there, and generally it is seen that he belongs to a low socio-economic standard. Amongst the Azande tribe, Pritchard observed that sorcery and witchcraft are very important for worldview. They help you in understanding world in a better way, and they can also explain the reasons behind misfortunes. And all in all, it brings a certain sense of social control as well. And then who is medicine man? Medicine men are traditional healers who deal in herbal medicines, local medicines, endemic medicines, who can help you heal, who know the antidotes, right? For example, in Navajo tribe, they perform healing ceremonies, right? In fact, in some societies, they are so important that they can also be agents of conflict resolution, because they have a very high reputation in the society and people tend to listen to them, right? So that way also they are very, very important. Right? Okay, so thank you everyone. I'll meet you again in the next class.